Have you ever felt abandoned not by strangers but by the very person you trusted the most? What if betrayal isn't loud, dramatic, or obvious, but instead happens slowly, quietly, like a candle burning out without warning? And what if the deepest wounds we carry aren't from enemies but from those who once promised to love us through anything? There is a kind of betrayal that never makes a sound, no screaming matches, no infidelity scandals, no doors slamming shut behind someone storming out. No, this kind of betrayal is quieter than silence, softer than a whisper. It happens in the stillness. It's when someone you gave your whole heart to, someone you trusted with your time, your soul, your loyalty, chooses the path of comfort instead of the promise of commitment. And they don't tell you they're leaving because they never really walk away. They just stop showing up when it matters most. They were right there when life was beautiful. They were present when joy was easy, when your world was full of light, laughter, and abundance. When blessings flowed like a river and the skies were forever blue, they clapped the loudest, smiled the widest, and held your hand without hesitation. But when life turned dark, when the winds of hardship began to howl, when storms rolled in uninvited, and the fire of adversity tested every inch of your soul, they didn't just falter. They vanished. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't explain. They didn't fight for you or with you. They simply disappeared into convenience and called it circumstance. But let's be clear, that is not simply someone exiting your life. That is betrayal in its purest form, when someone leaves you bleeding in silence after dancing with you in the sunshine, because loyalty, true, unshakable loyalty, is never tested in comfort. It's proven in crisis. It doesn't reveal itself when it's easy to stay. It proves itself when every reason says run, and yet they stay rooted beside you anyway. If someone walks away from you in the very moment your soul is on life support, in the very season where you were desperate for one person to hold space for your pain, and they choose to flee, then they didn't just abandon you. They betrayed something far deeper than trust. They betrayed your value, because love is never a product of circumstance. Love is a decision, one made in discomfort, in imperfection, in the middle of chaos. And if they chose to quit when the pressure rose, they never truly loved you. They only loved the ease that came with your presence when it cost them nothing. Let me speak something hard and holy to your spirit. People will tell you they care. They'll say they've got your back. They'll quote loyalty like a badge they wear proudly. But the fire always exposes the fakes. Because real love doesn't run. Real loyalty doesn't shrink back when life gets messy, when emotions overflow, when you're not at your best. And if someone left you in your moment of deepest need, if they turned their back while you were bleeding, while your heart was crying out for just one steady hand, that person was never a true partner. They were simply passing through your story, never intending to help carry the weight of your pages. And yet, here's where so many of us make the mistake: we try to explain their absence. We try to excuse the betrayal. We say things like, maybe they were going through something, or maybe I expected too much, or maybe they didn't know how to handle my pain. But no. Let me tell you the truth with no filter. Real love doesn't vanish when it gets uncomfortable. Real love leans in. Real love stays. So if they chose the exit when you were standing at your lowest, that is not someone to hold on to, that is someone to let go of with peace and clarity. Because abandonment doesn't always come with a slam door or a shouting match. Sometimes, it's the person who fades away silently, who stops answering your calls, who stops checking in, who ghosts you emotionally while still wearing the mask of friendship or love. And the most painful part, sometimes, betrayal doesn't even mean they physically left. Sometimes they're still sitting at your dinner table, still waking up next to you, still talking to you like everything's fine. But inside, something has gone missing. The spark, the presence, the care, it's not there anymore. They stop caring. They stop listening. They stop praying with you. They stop seeing your tears. They become a ghost with a name and a face. And that, too, is betrayal. When someone chooses to disconnect from you emotionally, mentally, spiritually, even while still being physically present, they have broken something sacred. Because half showing up can be more devastating than not showing up at all. You end up holding on to a body that no longer carries a heart for you. You're standing in a room with someone whose mind left weeks, months, maybe even years ago, and it leaves you not just lonely but confused. It makes you question your own worth. It makes you ask, am I asking for too much? But hear this, you're not. What you're asking for isn't excessive, it's covenant. It's what real relationship demands. It's what you were made for. So what do you do when someone you trusted turns quiet, distant, absent? Not by walking away, but by slowly stopping the things that matter most. Let's go deeper. Because this kind of betrayal, this emotional abandonment, is more common and more painful than most people realize. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It doesn't crash through the front door or break windows on the way out. No, it moves slowly, like a fog creeping into the corners of a relationship, until one day you wake up and realize someone you love has stopped showing up for you emotionally. They're still there physically. They still share your space. They may still eat dinner at the same table, sleep in the same bed, sit on the same couch beside you. But something has left. The spark, the warmth, the heartbeat of connection, it's gone. And the silence of that absence becomes louder than any fight you've ever had. You see, betrayal doesn't always come dressed as cheating or lies. Sometimes, it's far more subtle, more suffocating. It's when the person who once asked about your day with real curiosity, who used to reach for your hand not out of habit but out of longing, now barely looks up from their screen. They nod. They grunt. They scroll. They pass by you like you're part of the furniture, not the one they once prayed for. And this kind of distance, it doesn't happen overnight. It builds. It grows in the gaps between unspoken disappointments and unmet needs. It deepens every time you try to share your heart and are met with indifference. Every time your tears fall and they don't notice. Every time you whisper your pain and they don't lean in. Until eventually, you stop speaking altogether. You stop asking for connection. You begin to shrink into yourself, not because you want to but because you're tired of being invisible in the very place that was supposed to be your refuge. Let me tell you something important. You are not needy. You are not asking for too much. Emotional presence is not a luxury in love, it is the lifeblood of it. It is what separates true intimacy from shallow coexistence. And when someone chooses to shut you out emotionally, when they build walls where there should be bridges, when they treat your voice like background noise and your needs like burdens, they are not loving you, they are slowly abandoning you. And perhaps the most dangerous thing about this kind of betrayal is that it doesn't leave visible scars. It leaves silent ones, the kind that make you question your worth, your value, your right to be seen. It's the kind of betrayal that forces you to perform peace just to keep the relationship alive, even as your own spirit is starving. So many people are lying next to someone every night and still feeling more alone than they ever have. And the ache is deep, not because of what's happening, but because of what used to be. Because you remember when they cared. You remember when they listened. You remember when their eyes met yours with attention, not obligation. But now, you feel like a burden in your own home. And this emotional disconnection, it's not just neglect. It's not a phase. It's a betrayal of covenant. Because real love doesn't just stay in the room. It engages. It connects. It chooses to show up with heart, with soul, with intention. Love that only brings a body but no presence is love in name only. It's not enough. Presence without participation is abandonment wearing a mask. And you cannot build a future with someone who is emotionally absent in your present. Because what builds the foundation of a lasting relationship is not just shared space, it's shared heart, shared effort, shared empathy. When those things begin to die, what's left is a shell of performance, or routine, but not love. And the most heartbreaking part, many people will choose to stay in this silence, in this slow fade, convincing themselves that it's normal, that it's just what long-term relationships become. But I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be this way. And it shouldn't be, because love that costs you your voice is not love. Love that silences your needs for the sake of someone else's comfort is not love. When someone refuses to engage with your soul, when they turn away from your emotional hunger, that is a betrayal far deeper than physical absence. It's a betrayal of your spirit, and no matter how many shared memories you hold, no matter how many years you've been together, no amount of history can justify the kind of present that leaves you emotionally starving. So let me ask you something difficult but necessary. Are you holding on to someone who has already let go of you in every way that matters? Because if they're not choosing to see you, hear you, feel with you, then they've already left. You're just the last to admit it. In the next part, we'll talk about another betrayal, one that doesn't steal your time or your emotions, but something far more sacred, your vulnerability. Let's talk about what happens when someone uses your deepest truths against you. There's something sacred, something almost holy about vulnerability. When you choose to open up to someone, when you pull back the layers of your life and allow another human being to see the real you, not the polished, put together version, but the you beneath the surface, the one with scars, with regrets, with silent battles. That is not just emotional honesty. That is trust at its deepest level. And that kind of trust, it's never casual. It takes courage to hand someone your story. To say, here's what hurt me. Here's what shaped me. Here's the chapter I've never let anyone read before. It takes bravery to let another person into your pain, to hand them not just the facts of your life, but the fragile, trembling pieces of your soul. And when someone takes that sacred offering and twists it, weaponizes it, or carelessly exposes it to others, what you've experienced is not just a misstep. It is a profound and personal betrayal. You see, betrayal doesn't always come with loud voices or physical absence. Sometimes, it comes in the form of exposure, when the very person who once held your hand in the dark turns on the light and invites others to mock the parts of you they swore they'd protect. It happens when someone who once said, "You're safe with me," later throws your trauma back in your face during an argument. It happens when they take your confession, your midnight whisper, and repurpose it into ammunition. That is not just unkind, it is a violation of the deepest kind. Because when you open up to them, you weren't asking them to fix you. You weren't looking for perfection. You were simply asking for gentleness. And when they responded with judgment, manipulation, or mockery, they didn't just show you their character, they exposed how unworthy they were of your trust to begin with. Let's be honest, some people smile in your face and pretend to listen with love, but what they're really doing is studying your wounds, not to help you heal, but to know exactly where to cut when the moment benefits them. And when they strike, it's not the kind of pain you can explain with words. It's the kind that makes you question whether vulnerability is even worth it again. It's the kind of betrayal that echoes through your mind long after the moment has passed. You lie awake replaying what you said, wondering why you trusted them, wishing you could take it all back. But the damage is already done. And the hardest part is that no apology, no excuse, no "I didn't mean it like that" can unbreak what they chose to break. Because some things aren't just about words. Some things are about weight. And the weight of what you shared, the cost of what it took for you to say it was never theirs to throw around like a weapon. When someone turns your vulnerability into gossip. When they mock your past instead of holding it tenderly. When they shame you for the very pain you trusted them with. That is not immaturity. That is not misunderstanding. That is betrayal in its rawest, cruelest form. And let me speak this clearly. Just because someone says I'm sorry doesn't mean they're safe. Sorry without changed behavior is just manipulation wearing better clothes. And your soul is far too precious to keep handing back to someone who slices it a little deeper each time they say they've changed. You have every right to draw boundaries after that kind of betrayal. You have every right to protect what is sacred within you. You have every right to walk away without guilt. Because your heart was never designed to be a battleground, and your vulnerability was never meant to be turned into a sword. So please, don't feel obligated to re-explain your pain to people who only want to use it as leverage. Don't confuse forgiveness with reconciliation. Because yes, you can release the bitterness. Yes, you can let go of the anger. But that doesn't mean you're required to open the door again. In the next part, we're going to go even deeper into the kind of betrayal that doesn't just break your heart. It violates your boundaries. And for many, it's the one that goes unnoticed the longest. There's a form of betrayal that hides in plain sight, so subtle, so quiet, that it often goes unnoticed until your soul begins to feel like it's unraveling. It doesn't show up in dramatic blow-ups. It doesn't come with insults, accusations, or chaos. Now, this betrayal slips in quietly, like a shadow stretching across your spirit. It's the betrayal of your boundaries, and it's one of the most dangerous betrayals of all because it doesn't shout. It chips away at you little by little until, one day, you barely recognize yourself. Boundaries are not barriers meant to push people away. They are sacred lines drawn to protect your peace, your dignity, and your emotional safety. They are the voice of self-worth saying, this is where I end, and where you must respect me. But when someone repeatedly crosses those lines not by accident, not out of confusion, but because they simply don't believe they have to honor them, what they're doing is far more than being inconsiderate. They are betraying the trust you placed in them to care for your well-being. And for many of us, that betrayal starts slowly. It might begin with little comments that make you feel small, with persistent requests that override your comfort, with pressure to do things you never agreed to, or with constant demands on your time, your energy, your emotional availability. And because you care, because you don't want to lose the relationship, you let it slide. You convince yourself it's not that big of a deal. You silence your instincts. You back down just a little. And that's where the betrayal begins, not just theirs, but your own. Because with every moment you ignore your own voice, every time you swallow your discomfort just to keep the peace, you are teaching them something dangerous. That it's okay to take more than they give. That your no is optional. That your worth is negotiable. Let me be honest with you, some of the people who cross your boundaries the most are not cruel by intent. But they know exactly what they're doing. They've learned that you will eventually cave. That you will explain, apologize, or simply surrender. And the more you do it, the more they will take. Not because they are evil, but because they're comfortable with your silence. And here's the truth that many of us don't want to face. Just because someone says they love you doesn't mean they respect you. Because real love never requires you to sacrifice yourself to keep someone else comfortable. Real love doesn't bulldoze your boundaries in the name of connection. Real love listens when you say, "This hurts me." Real love adjusts. You do not owe anyone an apology for needing space. You do not owe long explanations for wanting to protect your time, your peace, or your emotional limits. You do not exist to be available 24/7. You are not obligated to keep bleeding for people who refuse to stop cutting. And yet, how many times have you done exactly that? How many times have you let someone back in who's proven over and over again that they will step on your limits the moment it suits them? The betrayal of boundaries often hides under the mask of closeness. We've been through so much together. They don't mean to hurt me. I don't want to start a fight. But let me tell you, every time you ignore that small voice inside, the one that says this doesn't feel right, you are abandoning yourself so that someone else doesn't have to be uncomfortable. And that is not love. That is self-erasure. You cannot become whole by allowing yourself to be hollowed out. You cannot build a life of joy, clarity, and peace while constantly living in fear of someone else's disappointment. Because every time you let someone cross a boundary without consequence, you send a message not just to them, but to yourself that your well-being is optional. And you were never created to be someone else's emotional punching bag. You were never meant to feel like your needs are a burden. And you were never designed to keep shrinking so others could stretch beyond their limits at your expense. So if someone continues to ignore your boundaries, if they guilt you, gaslight you, or manipulate you into giving more than you have, then it's time to make a choice. It's not about whether they're good or bad. It's about whether your soul can thrive in a place where your voice is dismissed. Because you can forgive someone and still say, "You no longer get access to me like that." In the next section, we'll talk about what true forgiveness looks like, and why forgiving someone doesn't mean inviting them back in to hurt you again. Forgiveness. It's one of the most beautiful, powerful things we're called to extend, and one of the most misunderstood, because somewhere along the way, many of us were taught that to forgive someone means we must also welcome them back in. That true forgiveness requires restoration. That grace means no boundaries. That healing means reopening doors that once hurt us. But that's not always true. In fact, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, for your future, and even for your peace is to forgive someone, and never let them close to you again. You see, there are certain betrayals that are so deep, so personal, so violating, that reconnection would not be healing, it would be reopening the wound. These aren't petty disagreements or misunderstandings. These are betrayals that fractured your trust, broke your spirit, stole your sense of safety, and made you question your own value. And when that kind of pain takes place, reconciliation isn't always part of the path. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the hurt didn't happen. It doesn't mean pretending the person has changed when they haven't. It doesn't mean putting yourself back in the same place you were when you got broken the first time. No, forgiveness is something deeper. It's a decision you make to release yourself from the grip of bitterness. It's the choice to no longer let someone else's actions hold power over your emotions, your energy, or your future. It's laying down the weight not to excuse what they did, but to stop carrying it. But let me say this clearly. You can forgive someone and still protect your boundaries. You can release the offense and still refuse to give them a seat at your table. Because not everyone who apologizes is safe. Not everyone who says "I've changed" has done the hard work of transformation. And not everyone who hurt you deserves a second chance at access. That doesn't make you bitter. That makes you wise. It means you've learned the difference between grace and gullibility. It means you've come to understand that just because God calls us to love, doesn't mean He calls us to stay in cycles of emotional harm. Because forgiveness is about your freedom, not their comfort. And some people, let's be honest, may never see the damage they caused. They may never apologize. They may never own the weight of their words, the sharpness of their actions, or the wreckage they left behind. But you don't need their apology to move on. You don't need their change to find peace. You need clarity. You need truth. You need the courage to say, "I forgive you, but I cannot let you back in." Because if you allow someone who shattered your spirit to return without change, without accountability, without respect for your healing, then you risk repeating a pattern that already cost you too much. And how many times will you let someone teach you the same painful lesson before you finally believe them? Forgiveness is not weakness. It is strength. But restoration is not automatic. It's conditional. And if they haven't done the work, if they haven't shown consistency, humility, or genuine repentance, then what you owe them is distance, not another chance. Your heart is not a revolving door for people who treat loyalty like an option. Your spirit is not a home for those who only show up when it suits them. And your peace is not a sacrifice you make just to keep someone else from feeling the consequences of their betrayal. So yes, release the resentment. Let go of the anger. But don't confuse peace with passivity. You can forgive and still walk away. You can love from afar. You can choose healing without choosing reunion. Sometimes the most heartbreaking realization isn't just that someone hurt you, it's that the version of them you love no longer exists, or maybe never truly did. And in your longing for healing, in your deep desire for peace, you begin to ask dangerous questions like, what if I just let them back in? What if I gave them one more chance? But here's something you must hear. Repeating history isn't the same as redeeming it. Offering forgiveness doesn't mean you owe someone another opportunity to walk through the parts of you they once broke. Forgiveness sets you free, not them. In fact, true forgiveness often looks like distance. It looks like closing the door softly, but firmly. It looks like choosing to wish them well without letting them reach you again. It's no longer being driven by revenge, or bitterness, or obsession, but also not being manipulated by guilt, false hope, or the fear of being alone. And this is where it gets hard. Some of the people you forgive, you'll still miss. You'll remember their laughter, the moments you shared, the comfort of their presence before the fracture. But you'll also remember the silence after they left you bleeding. You'll remember the emptiness when they stopped showing up. The pain of explaining yourself over and over again to someone who only listened when it served them. That's what makes betrayal so disorienting. It lives side by side with memory. One part of your heart grieves what was, while the other part fights to protect what's left of you. But even so, you can still choose to walk away, not because you're angry, not because you're cold, but because you finally realize that some people are only meant to be part of your past, not your future. And maybe, just maybe, one of the most powerful acts of self-love is this: refusing to keep proving your worth to someone who was blind to it in the first place. You don't have to rehearse your pain anymore just to be understood. You don't have to beg for acknowledgement from someone who never truly saw you. You don't have to keep explaining why it hurt when they already knew. Because the ones who deserve a place in your life don't need to be convinced. They recognize your value instinctively. They handle your heart gently. They respect your boundaries naturally, not as obstacles, but as signs of love and mutual care. So if you're standing at that door today unsure whether forgiveness means turning the knob and inviting them back, and hear this: sometimes love says goodbye. Sometimes peace is found on the other side of letting go. And as we move into the final part, we'll talk about the betrayal that hides under the surface longer than most, the betrayal of your boundaries. It may seem invisible, but its impact can shape your entire sense of self if you don't learn to name it and confront it. There's one more betrayal we need to talk about, the one that often goes unnoticed the longest. The one that doesn't begin with raised voices or dramatic exits, but with quiet compromise. It's the betrayal of your boundaries. And this betrayal, it's not always intentional. In fact, it often disguises itself as love. It comes wrapped in familiarity and routine, and we've been together so long, or they don't really mean to hurt me. But no matter how gently it enters, its damage is real and it runs deep. Because boundaries are not walls of rejection. They are not selfish demands or emotional barriers. Boundaries are sacred declarations. This is what honors me. This is what protects me. This is what I need to remain whole. And when someone repeatedly steps over those lines, whether by ignoring your no, dismissing your pain, guilting you into silence, or taking more than they ever give, what they're doing is not just testing your patience. They are betraying your trust. They are violating the invisible agreements that healthy love requires. What makes this betrayal especially painful is that it doesn't happen all at once. It's subtle. It's slow. It shows up as tiny sacrifices, little moments when you say yes while your heart screams no. It comes when you feel like you're walking on eggshells just to keep the peace. It creeps in when you stop asking for what you need because you're tired of being told you're too much. And before you know it, you're emotionally drained, spiritually numb, mentally exhausted, and all the while, the person beside you still claims to love you. But love that doesn't respect boundaries isn't love. It's control dressed as closeness. It's comfort that comes at your expense. It's connection that feeds off your silence. And here's the truth. You don't need to be loud to be strong. You don't need to scream to draw a line. You don't have to wait for someone to push you to the edge before you say, enough. You have permission to protect your peace. You have permission to choose your well-being over someone else's convenience. You have permission to walk away from people who only show up when it benefits them. Because someone who truly loves you, who truly honors you, will never make you feel like your needs are a burden. They will never roll their eyes at your no. They will never punish you for having standards, for needing time, for asking for space to breathe. You see, boundaries aren't just rules, they are the language of self-respect. And when someone refuses to learn that language, no matter how close they once were, they are betraying not just you but the sacredness of what relationship is meant to be. So maybe it's time to stop chasing people who only show up halfway. Maybe it's time to stop begging to be seen by those who only want to look when it's easy. Maybe it's time to stop making excuses for behavior that chips away at your soul. Because here's what you must remember. You are not asking for too much. You're asking the wrong person. There is a love out there that honors boundaries, that leans in during hard conversations, that chooses to stay not just in comfort, but through storms, through silence, through shadows. A love that doesn't require you to shrink in order to be kept. A love that holds you as sacred, not seasonal. So if someone continually betrays your heart, your trust, your emotional safety, or your boundaries, it's not your job to keep the door open. It's not your calling to carry the relationship alone. And it's certainly not your responsibility to keep giving chances to someone who sees your heart as optional. Let them go. Yes, forgive. Yes. Release the bitterness, but understand forgiveness is about your freedom, not their return. Don't wait for their apology to start healing. Don't wait for closure to choose peace. Some endings are holy. Some doors must close so you can finally breathe. And when you finally step away from the betrayal, whether it came through absence, weaponized vulnerability, or broken boundaries, you'll discover something sacred. You didn't lose them. You found yourself. So don't ignore the betrayals that whisper instead of scream. Don't minimize the pain just because it was quiet. Because real betrayal is not just what breaks you. It's what teaches you how to rebuild stronger, wiser, and more whole. You deserve relationships that nourish, not drain. You deserve loyalty that's consistent, not conditional. You deserve love that doesn't flinch when things get hard. So from this moment forward, protect your heart like the treasure is, and never again settle for anything less than love that honors both your presence and your boundaries. If this message spoke to your heart, don't forget to share it with someone who needs the reminder. And remember, you are worthy of a love that stays, that listens, and that never betrays what's sacred inside you. If this message stirred something in your soul, don't just scroll away. Maybe you've been carrying silent pain. Maybe you've been betrayed in ways words can't describe. Or maybe you just needed someone to say, you're not asking for too much. You're asking to be treated right. If that's you, then this is your moment. Subscribe to this channel not just for content, but for truth, for healing, and for strength to stand where others folded. Share this video with someone who's been walking through betrayal in silence. You never know whose healing might begin with just one click. And in the comments, tell us which part hit home the most for you. Your story might just be the voice someone else needs to hear. You are not alone. You are not broken. And you are not forgotten. You are becoming wiser. You are becoming stronger. And you are finally choosing yourself. So don't just watch. Take your power back. This isn't the end of your story. This is the beginning of your rise. Thank you for your listening. Goodbye and see you in the next video.